right, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well today. It's great to see some familiar faces and some new ones. And feel free to turn on your camera. Uh, and yeah, and if you just arrived, let us know where you're calling in from via the chat. So today's session is a co-hosted session by Dale Carnegie and the Stoa. And I'm Peter, the founder of the Stoa. And the Stoa is an online event space focused on practical philosophy and cultural sense making. I'm also a trainer at Dale Carnegie, and I'll be introducing today's guests in just a moment. But first, I'd like to take in Kevin Crone, President and Managing Partner at Dale Carnegie of the Greater Toronto Area in South Central Ontario, to share a few words. Kevin.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Nice to see everyone here. Really looking forward to our time together with Edward and David today. David, your work has been important to me over the years and our teams. And I know my business partner would love to be on here today, but he's delivering for one of our clients today because he's a real fan of yours. Yeah, we're excited. Thank you, Peter, for the inspiration and foresight to put together our communities to bring you the Carnegie Stoa and have great guests like this. And so, just quick introduction, just for our community here. So I'm Kevin Crone. Yeah, I run Dale Carnegie here in Ontario and in the Maritime provinces of Canada. And if you can see this gentleman beside me, if you're not familiar with Dale Carnegie, author of How to Win Friends and Influence People, How to Stop Worrying, Start Living, and we're an international training and business consulting organization, and that's our job here in Ontario and in the Maritimes is supporting organizations to bring out the best in their organization, their teams, and of course people, and so it gives you a little insight into our business and excited to have a lot of our clients here today too.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. And yeah, so I'll introduce today's guests. We got David Allen, who's an international best-selling author and the creator of productivity methodology, Getting Things Done. And here's the book that started it all. And David has been a guest at the Stoa twice before, where we discussed GTD, getting things done. And it happens to be my absolute favorite systems. I'm very bullish on it. Every time David joins us, I always feel compelled to show my massive getting things done poster. um, it's on the office, always ready to have a look. And David is joined by Edward Lamont, and Edward is a co-founder and senior partner of Next Action Associates. It's official GTD partner for the UK and Ireland. He's also the co-author with David of the brand new book, Team, Getting Things Done with Others. And that's what we'll be talking about today. And so how the session came about, I mentioned David and GTD on one of my Substack articles, and then Edward read it, and he reached out. And on the same day, I had lunch with Kevin, and then just something started clicking, like, two of my favorite things, Carnegie, GTD, let's maybe bring them together and see what happens. And so this is how the session emerged. And how today will work, I'll interview David and Edward for the first 20, 30 minutes at a very high level to get the sense of the book, and then we'll open up for Q&A. So if you have any questions anytime, pop them in the chat and I'll call on you. You can unmute yourself and ask your question to David and Edward. That being said, we'll begin. And David, Edward, welcome. It's great to have you both join us. Can you guys unmute yourself now? Oh, no, you're not. You're still unmute prison. Sorry about that.
Okay, I'm here. All right. Thanks for the invitation. Yeah, delighted to be here with you, Peter, and obviously with Ed, my long-term colleague and great friend and co-author. Yay.
Yeah, no, it's actually quite poignant to be here with you because probably 42 years ago, not to be too exact, but 42 years ago, I moved to Germany. I think the only book I took with me was the How to Win Friends and Influence People book, and there's still stuff. It made a huge impression on me as a young man, and there's some of that stuff that still goes with me, like never well, whenever possible, not forgetting people's names or how to spell their names, and sort of weird, trivial stuff, but actually really, really powerful when used over the course of a lifetime. So it's great to be here.
Right on.
Beautiful. Imagine we'll see some intersections between Carnegie and getting things done. So the first question I have is basically what motivates you to write the book and look beyond the individual productivity to focus on team performance?
Ed, go ahead.
Yeah, well, so a bit like you, Peter, this is like the system that David wrote about in the first book absolutely transformed my life, transformed what was possible for me as an individual. And so because I was already in training and coaching, I spotted this opportunity, which was, hey, there's this amazing thing that clearly can transform lives. And I've got a ton of clients that are dying in their inboxes. So I went and got trained and got coached and got the license for most of Europe as it was at the time. And then spent 10 years teaching individuals how to sort themselves out, and mostly successfully. Anybody who used anything that we taught them was better off. The more they used, the better off they were. And then it was just sort of in the latter part of that, about 10 years in, when I began to get a sense that we were teaching smart, motivated people how to deal with the maelstrom in which they were living, but then sending them back to work in structures that really didn't work for them. So David and I, over lunch in Amsterdam, were throwing around some ideas, and one of them was, there is a possibility here that is, it based in the principles of GTD, but active at a different level. And the other thing that we kind of recognized was that we weren't actually teaching people what we were doing between us, the things that we had learned to do to collaborate well together. That wasn't really in the individual package. So we just thought there was a real opportunity to do something that would take the message further. Yeah.
And I have to say, from the very beginning, when I began to work with this stuff in the 1980s, only 40 plus years ago, people would get this methodology, or they would start to implement the methodology, and they go, God, I wish everybody around me got this. It would make life and work so much easier. But I never really had the time, the bandwidth, or model yet fixed in my mind about how you would do that. And so I still kept being busy for the next 40 years, really, just dealing with the personal productivity aspects that I wrote about in Getting Things Done, the book. And at the same time, now in retrospect, I can see that a whole lot of what I was dealing with in the thousands of hours that I spent one-on-one desk side with some of the best and brightest people on the planet, that what they were dealing with, that I was helping them deal with, was a lot of the results of dysfunctional teams. Now I realize that, emails they didn't need to get, meetings they had to go to that they shouldn't go to, all kinds of lack of clarity about roles, about who was doing what and who was responsible for what. And I didn't have a way to really kind of structure what all that was, but Ed has had more experience than me in the last decade of dealing with senior people, dealing with those kinds of things more from that context. So when he brought this up at lunch, God, Ed, this is 4 years ago, right? 4 plus. I said, okay, let's fill in the gap. Let's see if we can do that. So we spent 4 years in trying to figure out and writing the manual, essentially, of all the things we in our combined 60 plus years of consulting and training and coaching with senior people in the professional world, the best practices. Not that everybody needs it, because a lot of them are already doing best practices to be where they are, but there's a lot of improvement opportunity around the edges and in the core of a lot of what people are doing together. Because you can have a high performing soccer player, but if the team doesn't know how to work together, then they're going to lose. So there's a difference, as Ed mentioned, there's a difference of application of the principles. They're still the same principles, but that was why it inspired me to say, this is a gap I've never been able to fill. We should fill it now. And Ed had expertise, and the writing skills to be able to work with me to fill that gap.
And what would you say is the biggest reasons teamwork breaks down in modern organizations?
The mechanics aren't clear, or the mechanics aren't set up. What Ed and I didn't try to address were some of the bigger issues that teams need to deal with. What's our vision, where we're going, charisma, collaboration, a lot of that big stuff has a lot to do with relationships and the emotions of the team and so forth. We didn't address that because we discovered that if the mechanics of how the team works together are not intact, it creates all kinds of other emotional and other bad news in terms of how the team is trying to address the bigger stuff that they should be addressing. So the book is really more about, and what we decided to catalog are the mechanics of how a great team works. And we use the phrase healthy high performance. And healthy meaning sustainable, you're not burning people out, and repeatable. You have half your people just left because they're global and half of them just left and they got another 4 people on the team. How repeatable are the best practices if you had them to begin with for the team, so people can come on, seamlessly with the standards the team has. But there's lots of those rules and standards and other kinds of things that have a lot to do with the mechanics of how a team just works together.
Yeah, and I would pick up the same point, but from a slightly different perspective. I think it's the clarity that we articulated 5 principles of a team in the book, and it's the clarity around things like the mechanics. If that's missing, then people are operating in vagueness, and the vagueness leads to non-delivery. It leads to misunderstandings. It leads to frustration, resentment, all the things that, eventually you need to do a team dynamics seminar for, but you don't need the team dynamics seminar on, what's your psychological profile, if a lot of those things just aren't happening. If communications are smooth and only done when necessary, if meetings have the right people in them and they know why they're there, when they're there, if people are accountable for their actions because everybody's tracking them, then you just produce better outcomes.
And I like the definition you gave on team, and I'll put it in the chat. So any group that comes together regularly or ad hoc to achieve a common aim that is far more easily achieved together than anything that parts might achieve on their own, that any part might achieve on their own. And so you mentioned the principles, and the first one being clarity. And so I'm wondering if you can speak on what are the principles essential to making a team effective.
Well, as articulated in the book, is that the question?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the 5 are, and I will, having written them, will have an attempt at remembering them. Sufficient trust, open communication, learning, and diversity, where we, of course, that's become a bit of an odd word recently. But we mean it in terms of diversity of thought. So clarity was first among equals, because it touches all of those other ones, and just about every other part of a team is, the more clarity you have, the more easy it is to communicate and get things done together. The sufficient trust was simply, you need to basically trust each other enough that you believe that the other person will at least try to deliver what they say they're going to deliver. You don't have to love each other, but you do need to have that much trust in order to, to have meetings and go out of the meetings thinking something's going to happen. Open communication, again, is not about revealing all of your secrets. It's just that, in the business of the team, no one's hiding things, so that everyone's clear on what is currently the state of play. You need open communication for that. Learning, because if you're not learning, then people are pulling ahead of you, because they are doing debriefs. They are taking time to review what they did and how it went. They are taking time to upgrade their skills. And if you aren't doing that, then you're almost by definition falling behind in the world we're in. And then the diversity one, again, just diversity of thought, not necessarily of race or gender, but you at least need some differences in perspective in order to get robust solutions to what you're looking at.
And this might be an overview for people who are familiar with GTD, but I imagine many aren't. In the heart of the book is the sort of the three models of GTD. I'm going to share my screen actually and put this up. There we go. The three models right here from the book. So you got the original GTD, the control, then you got the horizons, the focus, and then you got the planning. And I'll put that in the chat in a moment. But starting with control, what are the most common breakdowns in team coordination, and how do the 5 steps that were just shown, capture, clarify, organize, reflect, and engage, help prevent them?
Well, kind of goes to open communication, but how many teams have to deal with your analysis? Your analysis means, hey, you're in the toilet. Yeah, but you don't know. And well, yeah, but what we have to, and what they're not talking about. It's like, oh, come on. You know, people are bitching and complaining and moaning about all kinds of stuff going on, and they're not voicing anything about that. They're not doing anything that would change it. They're into victim and complaining mode. So, you know, that's step number one, is to make sure that there's clarity, or that people capture what has the team's attention. If Ed or I walked into a team right now, the first question we'd ask is, what has the team's attention? Because if something has the team's attention, the team's probably not appropriately engaged with it yet. There are decisions that haven't been made yet. Or they haven't parked results of that decision making into trusted systems that people appropriately are not reviewing at some, you know, appropriate time to make sure that people stay current and stay on course. The world is changing so fast. What's new in the world of work is it's global, it's virtual, it's 24/7, it's AI, etc. It's all kinds of stuff that's going on that are affecting people in terms of how they're doing work and how clear they are about the work they need to be doing. And another new aspect of all that is burnout. People are not happy. A large portion of the workforce is not particularly happy about working where they are, the way they're working. Why? Not because of themselves personally necessarily. I mean, you, Peter, or you, Kevin, and I, we could all individually be clear about our world, but as soon as the three of us get together and we now have to do something together, which is the way the world is, then we've increased exponentially the complexity of how we manage our agreements. Is that yours, Kevin, or is it? Wait, no, that's Peter. Wait, and that, you know, kind of thing has increased hugely, especially these days.
And if you look at where that leads us, the most recent Gallup report came out about a month or so ago, and I was just doing a talk in Germany to a bunch of German CEOs. The engagement level in Germany was at 14% and dropped this year to 9%. Now that's low. Europe is traditionally lower than the US and Canada, but it's low everywhere. That's the highly engaged group. There's this great mass of about 78%. I mean, my figures are from Germany at the moment, but they replicate fairly well around the world. People aren't particularly happy about the way that work is happening to them, is the way that it feels. And I would say that if you look at that model of capture, clarify, organize, reflect, and engage, if you are clear around the mechanics of that and you actually execute them on some reasonably regular basis, then probably the biggest benefit is that the team actually knows how much it's already trying to do. Because if you don't know how much you're already trying to do, both as an individual and as a team, you will say yes to things that you should have said no to. And then everybody's living in overwhelm for all time and they're not happy, right? So if you're just executing those 5 steps as a team, then you will be able to get better control over a team projects list and begin to have some estimate of what do we need to let go of that we thought was important in order to take care of what is now important. And what tends to happen on teams is that nothing ever gets taken off the list. We just keep throwing stuff on, and that just doesn't work for people because we're human and we have a need for sleep.
That's why I love and Ed's coaching and his recommendation, and it's true. Our biggest chapter in the new book on team is called No.
Mm. You know, maybe
Hold on, hold that back.
maybe I'll jump. That was going to be my last question. Was like I think the second last chapter, the critical importance of saying no, which happens to be one of my favorite words. So yeah, how could a team build a culture that treats no as a strategic tool rather than like a source of shame or guilt?
Well, my suggestion is to be politically correct. It's like people are asking the team, or the team is handed some stuff to do, and they go, wow, what a cool project. What a neat thing to do. Unfortunately, we don't have the bandwidth right now to deal with that unless we drop some other things that may be very high priority. So we need to go up a level and find out from the powers that be where the priorities really are about this. And that means open communication and clarity about that. And then we say, and by the way, it's really worth putting great resources to. Why don't you check with Department X? I think they may be a better source of handling what you're talking about here.
Yeah, I think David's addressing the political challenge of saying no, because a lot of organizations, I don't know if it's a relic from the 80s or what it is, but it's like, hey, no, can do, we can do, and let's say yes and just and whatever, move fast and break things. And I think that there was a time and a place for that. I just don't think it's now. I think, but I mean, if I go to a quick little story from my team, one of the most valuable collaborators on the team regularly puts me at choice, and I don't like that when he does it, but I do appreciate it. Because basically he says, look, here's everything that I'm doing for you. You've just asked me to do these 2 other things, and they're pretty big. I will not be able to deliver all of that for you. So just tell me what it is that you really want, and I'm very happy to go do that. That's uncomfortable, but certainly for us to create a culture where no is appreciated, it is in those moments to not get upset and to go, you know what, you're right. I want you to have sleep, be able to walk your dog, spend time with your loved ones, and do your work, and you're fabulous at what you do. So it's only right that you say, I can do all of these things, I just can't do all of them right now. That's how the culture gets created, is that someone doesn't lose their stuff because they're inappropriately prioritizing everything.
I love that, Steve. Pressfield quote: "Yes lives in the land of no," or like a real true no gives like a true yes a chance. And I think that relates to the horizons as well. I'll pop up my screen again. So the horizons of focus, starts at the ground level, the horizon 1, the project, areas of focus, goals, visions, purpose, and principles. And I find when there's like personally, when there's a disconnect here, when I'm doing something that turns out to be busy work and it's not connected to a higher purpose, I get dispirited. And then like I forget how to say no in a way. You get disoriented. So I'm curious, for those horizons, how can teams connect their day-to-day work with the higher level purpose?
When we did this in the book, one of the things that we saw about teams, a lot of teams produce a purpose and a vision for themselves, and then don't really do much with it. They kind of just go, well, that's that done, and on we go. And the best that we've seen are people who not only do it, but they publicize it. They not only put it on the wall, but they talk about it. And not only do they talk about it, but they use it as a decision tool for what they're going to do and what they're not going to do. So, the question is this on purpose for us? Is this going to take us to our vision or not? Or is this going to get us there faster or not than these other things? That is a huge tool for team prioritization. So well spotted, Peter, because that's basically where you need to go if you want to be able to sort and purge, or at least temporarily move things into some version of someday maybe for the team.
And even strangely, a little more operational, but still at the high level, is the standards for the team. What would bother you on the team if what happened? What would be off our standards as how we work as a team? And so what really matters to you as a team works, and what you don't need is people to go through kind of personal transformational thing to discover their own personal purposes and standards. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. But for the team itself to get clear about how we work together, what are our rules of engagement about how we work together, especially if you have the team changing, people are leaving, people are coming on, do they know how you want to work together? Which channels? There's channel creep out there right now. Are you using Slack? Are you using Team? Are you using Google Meet? What are all the in baskets that you've decided or that the team actually has to deal with right now? Do we have any protocols about which ones we really use? So that's some of the mechanics in terms of but even up to the higher level in terms of the principles about how the team works. So you don't need a lot of them. You just need to make sure what would bother us and what would really turn us on in terms of how the team works together. So that's a great conversation to have if they haven't had it.
And that brings us to the last column, the natural planning model, which has purpose, principles, vision, brainstorm, organize, and the next steps. So when employees and teams are facing uncertainty and overwhelm, how does the natural planning model help move them from confusion to clarity?
Well, the natural planning model really, it's very similar to the horizons. You've got purpose, you've got vision, you've got, you have sort of that hierarchy about how you think about something. But the natural planning model was really designed, and I just really uncovered it or recognized it as a way to deal with a situation or a project specifically in terms of how you act on it and how you feel comfortable with what you're doing about that. The horizons are more about the content of those different levels of commitment that the team has. The natural planning model would be, okay, now we just have this project, and it's a key goal of ours for Horizon 3 of the horizon. How do we best deal with this so that we feel comfortable about how we're operating with it? And that's where the natural planning model comes into play.
And so I'll have a couple more questions. If you have any questions, pop them in the chat, and I'll call on you to unmute yourself and ask your question. So near the end, you talk about leadership, a chapter on leadership, and you describe leaders as gardeners. And so the question is, how can leaders cultivate their work gardens, if you will, to help teams thrive?
Well, I mean, we spent a bit of time looking for the right metaphor there. We liked mechanic, we liked plumber, we liked all kinds of different things, and we ended up with gardener because it's a living system, right? Teams are not pieces of metal that rub up against each other. They're human systems. They're alive. So the gardener is a better metaphor. I think if you extend that into leadership, then you're looking at, okay, well, can the gardener make flowers bloom? Well, not really, but the gardener can put in place the conditions in which the rose tree, the rose bushes bloom and bloom beautifully. So that's more where we wanted to put our attention. We were very clear that we didn't want the style of leadership that is obvious in a lot of places, or more obvious in a lot of places today than it was even a few years ago, where it's kind of like my way or the highway. That doesn't work terribly well for teams. It can move people into a state of fear that temporarily might get more out of them, but eventually they'll either leave or fall over. So the idea was, from a place of humility, right? Not like I'm humble, I'm eating humble pie, but humility as in here's what I'm good at, and here's what I'm not good at, to lead from the front on doing things that actually help the team perform at a higher level. And that involves making um, the work of the team easier, looking out for ways to make the work of the team easier. That's the role of the leader in our observation.
Yeah, the goal of the gardener is to have a beautiful garden. Trust me, anybody who's a gardener can tell you this year is very different than last year because some stuff didn't work. We had to pull it out and we're trying some new things. And I mean, it's a perfect metaphor, really, about someone who's trying to manage, what a team is about. And again, back up a little bit, you're only a team because there's a purpose for the team. So clarifying what the purpose of the team is, and then realizing the world is changing so fast in so many multiple levels right now that to keep that alive and well and current and fertile and growing and ready to take on the next cool thing to do or the next thing you need to focus on, that's an art. Ask any gardener. And by the way, ask any gardener, 90% of gardening is cleanup. Back to the no chapter. Right? What do you just stop doing? Which parts of the tree need to be snipped off right now so that it grows instead of sucking, juice that needs to be used for better things for the plant. So
And if we go to the previous point about saying no, one of the huge responsibilities of any gardener is pruning, right? It's not like you just keep throwing new plants into the same bed. You just keep adding and adding and adding plants. That doesn't happen. Doesn't work. So we thought the metaphor was actually quite apt, because a big part of the role of the gardener is to prune things so there is space for new life.
and people don't show up and say, wow, who's the gardener here? They show up and say, what a beautiful garden.
Mm-hmm.
Big change, especially from Carnegie's point of view. It's like, how humble, can you be if you're still managing something like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that metaphor. And yeah, this is kind of nicely weaves to the intersection of Carnegie and GTD. And I know Kevin has some questions and thoughts in this regard. So I'll take him in a moment. But yeah, that was, I think we touched on most aspects of the book. Is there anything else you'd like to add here as like a summarizing portion of the session?
I'll add, this is a manual. Most teams, because they're teams, they're still functioning, if they've been around for any length of time, are probably doing a lot of what's in the book already. They may not be conscious about that. So I don't know that it may not be sustainable or repeatable, but they don't necessarily need everything in that book. We tried to cover the whole spectrum. So it's, I suggest people sort of snack on the book. Look through it, have your whole team read the book, and then have a meeting and say, okay, guys, what rang your bell about all this? What do you do? What do you think we're doing well? Let's acknowledge that. What do you think we could improve on? And let's be aware of that and see what we could do.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would add there is, David mentioned it in the beginning, was this concept of healthy high performance. And we wrote the book because we thought, that's a critical piece for both individuals and for teams. It can't really happen unless you take time to define it and take time to work out how you're going to make it happen. Just like it doesn't happen for individuals unless they define for themselves what is good health for me? If you don't define it, then someone else will define it for you. It might not include sleep if they get to define it, right? So you actually have to do this for yourself as an individual, but certainly as a team. Let's define what this is, and we feel that the book is an articulation that basically everything in the book is built to support healthy high performance on a team.
Cool. So yeah, if you have questions, pop them in the chat. We'll get to you in a moment. But Kevin, I think you have a question or two.
Well, I really like the gardener analogy, and leadership is like the way you guys described, can be a thankless, thankless job. All the hard work that goes into the garden, people see the garden and not the hard work, of course. And I actually the question I was thinking from your years of experience, both of you, in coaching and working with executives, and how receptive owners, operators, and executives are to change, to adopt new practices, to develop, even better productivity habits or team habits. I know you work with thousands of people over the year, and so it becomes how open people are to change. Do you have any comments or reactions to that from your experience?
People change most out of pain. No,
Yeah.
they got their overwhelm got way out beyond what they were used to dealing with. And so they said, I need help. And so they were open to that. But open to that may sound like a lot of things. I spent a whole year coaching one of the top entrepreneurs in the world, actually. And by anybody's standards, he's probably one of the most successful people you would ever meet. And the reason he called me, I said, come on, why are you talking to me? He said, David, I'm out of room. He said, I'm up to here. I wake up with $1 million ideas. And I don't know where to put them or what to do with them. So the strange thing is the people most attracted to what we and Ed and I teach are the people who need it the least. They're already organized. They're already highly ambitious, and they're already aspirational. They're already focused. They already know the value of system. They already know, because that got them where they are. And they also know they could create more value because that got them where they are if they had more room. They just don't have the room. So how comfortable are you with the room you have right now with what you want to be doing? And those people who aren't yet, and it doesn't necessarily mean they're in pain, they just mean there might be opportunities out there they know they're missing because they're not on their game as well as they could be.
Yeah, it's a challenging one, particularly because, as David says, people who seek us out are usually fairly successful already, at least on one metric, right? And that's the easy to measure metric, which means that many of us are defaulting to it as a way of measuring our success. It's really only a lot of the time it's when you get close enough to be able to hear what's actually going on behind whatever their number is, whatever their number is for their measurement of their success, to find out, are they meeting with their doctor more often than they like? Are they, paying more for child therapists than they like? These are humans, right? So the impetus for change, unfortunately, does come usually from pain. There's a wonderful saying, which is, we don't change when we see the light, we change when we feel the heat. So when we smell the fire on the back of our trousers, we tend to decide it's worth investing some of our energy into something that's not what we've always done before.
But the pain, as I say personally, with all the stuff that I've done with getting things done over all these years, I say it's not so much overwhelm, it's ambient anxiety that people are used to. They're okay with waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and, oh my God, I should have. Or what about? Why? because they're not appropriately engaged with whatever that thing is that has their attention. So that it's like the last thing a fish notices is water. So usually the last thing people are aware of is how much anxiety they're living in.
Mhm.
And a lot of my job over the years has been to sort of model what it's like to not have it. You know, what's it like to have nothing on your mind, you know, and still be busy and be successful in terms of what you're doing.
What is it?
It's, well, it doesn't mean it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's just you're in a satisfactory mode, not in a anxiety mode. You're in a, wow, okay, I'm now, this is a tough situation I'm dealing with, but I'm dealing with it appropriately. So I don't have to be waked up at 3 o'clock in the morning about it. Same with a team. You know, is the team okay with where it is right now? It may be challenging, it has a lot of tough stuff to do, a lot of things to do, but is the team okay with where they are about that? You know, who's doing what? What's the status of it? How are we managing that, you know, now? So it's the same idea. But again, a lot of teams are used to meetings starting late, people bringing 14 digital products into a meeting that have nothing to do with the meeting, people going to meetings, they don't know why they're invited to the meeting. I mean, they're used to that. They think that's standard operating procedure. So getting them to realize that there's a different world out there is a lot of Ed and Mai's job over these years.
Right. That's the team ambient anxiety bring to the table, as we all bring our own or have our own. And it's funny you keep talking about the 3 a.m. and always in all your conversations that you're having is that ambient anxiety, you know, in the middle of the night, about 3 o'clock in the morning. That's about my time too. It's about 3. I wake up and I'm dealing with everything in my head, you know, all things. And one of my practices I talk about all the time is when it's just bad enough and I can't sleep, I will get up. I'll stop fighting it. I'll get up and David, I'll write out everything that's going on in my head. I'll download it all, you know, and for some reason it helps me relax and I can go back to sleep. I always think of you about that. Not always, not at 3 o'clock in the morning, but that's that principle. But what you guys are talking about in the team environment here is in what ways can we lead teams in such a way to bring bring clarity, work effectively well together to alleviate that ambient anxiety at a team level. You know, it's tough to do. It's a lot going on.
Debriefing is really critical for that. How do we do? What could we improve? What we do right? And a lot of teams don't do that, and so that still lingers in terms of, well, maybe we're going to screw up the next thing too. So
we just move on, right, to the next thing. We just pile it on. We never actually address, communicate, share, you know, be transparent.
All the above.
Right. And so it takes extraordinary wisdom maybe to slow down and to really check in and debrief.
I think one of the biggest sources of anxiety on teams, I would say, is when that point around open communication is not being honored. So if I don't have the sense that I can trust that if you have a problem with me, you're going to come to me rather than talking to David. And then, you know, you and David have a 3-month conversation about Ed. Ed still doesn't know, but kind of has a feeling something's not quite right, you know, with the way Kevin is treating him. And now David's treating him strange as well. If all that happens is, you know, one of the standards that you develop, probably the second longest chapter in the book is on working standards. If all you did was develop a standard of no triangulation, like we don't talk about each other with each other unless it is to prepare a conversation with the person I have a problem with, then all of a sudden people's anxiety levels will drop because they can count on the fact that everybody has their back in terms of not talking about them and bitching about them and moaning about them, rather than just coming and saying, hey, the thing that you're doing, not working for me or not working for us. That actually is a relaxing thing.
Mm.
Another point of view, I agree with Ed, totally, absolutely. But another thing is, a lot of issues could be handled one-on-one instead of going to a team meeting. A lot of issues that should have been handled by me talking to you, Kevin, and let's get us clear about this instead of bringing it up at the meeting. And then everybody's yawning or going to their email or whatever because it had nothing to do with them. And so, managing, who do I need to talk to about this to get clarity about it, to get my anxiety dropped about this particular thing in terms of appropriate engagement. So this is tricky business. It sounds simple, but not simply applied.
And without working together principles and practices, that will continue. That continues. And so if there's no clarity of those, co-designed, co-created, working together principles, that will sidetrack conversations and team meetings all day. Peter, I know there's a lot of great questions I'm reading here in the chat. You want to get to some of them?
Yeah. So Laura, you had a question. If you can unmute yourself and ask it to Edward and David.
Sure. So thank you for that. I was just hoping to get a little more insight in terms of if we exist in a can-do kind of culture today with our leadership, how do we kind of change that mentality? Like that's a big shift to get the buy-in to be able to say no, to reprioritize. So how do you go about that shift? Thank you.
Beats me.
I would pick it up and actually pick up what David was saying earlier, which is I think that what you don't want to do is try and change the entire culture by your lonesome. That would be lonely and painful, and perhaps career endangering. I think when it's best done, you don't actually have to say no. You just are making it clear that there are choices that need to be made, and they're above your pay grade. Like you asked me to do this, and I can do that, and you asked me to do that, and I can also do that. But now you've offered, this is this other thing, and I can either do that, but I can only really do that if we pass this thing off to somebody else, because otherwise I'm going to drop the ball. That for me still very much lives inside of a can-do culture, but it is saying no.
That makes sense to me. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Peter, you had a question.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, my question was, what's the best way to introduce this to a team? Because when I've been in a leadership position before, I've literally handed out copies of Getting Things Done and said, hey, team, this is how I work. If you understand that, then you'll understand a lot more about how we should interact. But if you're not in a leadership position or you're within a team, what's the best way, what's the best on-ramp to get these ideas, being considered by the team? Is there an opportunity, or is there a case to say, hey, let's go and have a team meeting about how we work? I'm confessing that I haven't read the book yet.
Well, once you have read it, then you could adopt the old strategy and simply give a copy to everybody on the team. Our publisher will not complain about that. But let's say you don't want to do that. I think you could make really great strides if you were coming into a situation as a team member and highlighting some things that aren't really working. Let's say in communication terms, if there are too many channels open, you could highlight that and say, it might work for us if we simply decided which channels we're going to use. or if the meeting culture is completely out of control, you could suggest some very simple changes, and then build on those. You could say, well, if that worked for us, maybe this will too. That's what immediately comes to me. David?
Yeah, well, you could do the same thing with just the capture process. You could go into a team situation and just say, look, guys, and you could own this. Like, I'm a little concerned that I'm not aware of all the things that are bothering or impacting our opportunities that we may be missing on a team right now. I'd love to hear from any of you. What are those? What are the things you think that we need to address or to deal with? So you don't just get rid of GTD out of your vocabulary. These are just great business practices, and honesty practices and clarity practices about how do we decide what's really critical that the team needs to address right now. So that's all I'd suggest.
All right, thanks, Peter. Drew, you had a question, the one you just posted. That's seems like an interesting one.
The one about the meetings?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess more specifically, and all these questions kind of fall under the category of what happens when you have a shitty boss. But I think a lot of us have, maybe all of us have found ourselves in a meeting that obviously didn't need to exist, except for the fact that we want to witness, right? Hey, so-and-so is in a position of power above me and does some sketchy shit. So if we have a team meeting, I feel safe. I think a lot of meetings are born from this place. And there's a whole dreaded like at HR from Evil Corp, right? Like once you press the send button on that, it escalates all of these things, which often isn't needed. So I'm just curious on your guys' thoughts on like team meeting as place for others to witness the logic or dialogos, and how to engage with that.
Well, Drew, in the same aspect, a lot of people are CC'd on things just to cover their ass. I just want to make sure that everybody who might need to know this knows this, and here's what's going on, so that I'm not blamed about any of this. So yeah, I'm not sure how you would deal with that generically, other than, hey, we had a client in New York in the Northeast in the US, a while ago, very senior and sophisticated financial firm that decided, once they'd all gone through the GTD training, that if you were invited to a meeting, the purpose was not clear, your role in that meeting was not clear, etc., you don't need to go. And because that could change your culture, just something like that. Now, how you implement that with somebody that's a shitty boss, I don't know. Other than, hold them to that standard, or just ask them, or leave.
Life is short. I mean, really, it's getting shorter and shorter all the time as we age. We can't just wave a magic wand and walk out, right? We all have responsibilities, but I think more and more it's a thing, right? When you've got 9% of the workforce in Germany who are highly engaged, there's a lot of people who are sharpening their CVs. So I genuinely believe life is too short to spend it working with people who do not build us up. If I'm in a situation where it is corrosive to my sense of myself, I don't have a lot. Like I've got some stuff, but actually the main thing I have is my sense of myself and my integrity in the world, right? If that's on the chopping block because someone is a lousy leader, then personally, it's not like I have a choice. I have to go, because otherwise my main asset is being destroyed. I'm not sure that that's what you wanted to hear, Drew, but that's where I go with it.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. I mean, I've been self-employed for a bit, and perhaps a better way to ask the question is, as leaders who unconsciously wound our direct reports, how do we stop doing that? I don't know if that's a better way to say it.
Hmm.
Do you guys have a hard stop, or we can sneak in one more question?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I would just have a simple answer called check with them. Find out.
Yeah.
Communication. Hey, how are we doing? How am I doing as a boss? What's working? What's not working? You can't beat that. I mean, talk to Kevin, Carnegie, right? Have him go through that training. Like, how do I find out how I'm doing out there? And a lot of people are just moving too fast to care.
As leaders, I think it's definitely harmonious with what David just said. Is listen. We it feels like we should be talking a lot when we're leading something, but actually there's a lot of space there to listen and understand what's actually going on in the world of the person who's opposite us, because until we understand that, it's very difficult to not hurt them unconsciously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You need to watch daily what's going on in your garden.
Mm-hmm. The follow-up there that I have is because you mentioned in the book just before the landscape section that this is, we're steering clear of interpersonal kind of soft skills. That's not what this book is about, even though you recognize it's important. And it's like, to Drew's point, like whether it's your boss or an employee, it's like that's one of the most, that causes ambient anxiety. Not the most, but one of them. What, like having difficult people that you're working with that have like manipulative ways of communication or whatever. And I'm curious if you have this like tight system, this GTA system, this team system in the organization, and it's agreed to, how much does that mitigate poor social skills, or does the social skill element still needs to have a robust focus on?
It's always going to help. So I think as I think I said a little bit earlier, I think if you've got those 5 principles articulated and in action on your team, then you should have less need to do the soft skilly kind of stuff, which is the soft skills, let's be clear, are the hard skills. They're really, really difficult. They don't fit in spreadsheets, and you've got to work at them for a lifetime. And they are not like they're not like judo moves you can use in every situation. They're different with every different person you have in front of you. But I think that if you have clarity in your team, you'll need less time spent sorting out misunderstandings.
Kevin, did you have a final question here or a follow-up on that?
No, I was just enjoying what Edward was just saying. Again, the work here is to design the team, how we're going to interact here once expectations and performance standards of how we're going to work here. If you have that in place as a foundation, less time needed, or all the soft skill challenges that we face, it cuts right through it, and then we can just get down to business, and work together, and so I was just kind of reflecting on that.
Yeah, there are a whole lot of people I don't necessarily like, but we can still get good stuff done and enjoy each other, in our chosen ways to interact. So liking everybody is not required.
Right. I thought that's coming to me. I don't know if you're familiar with Alan Mulally and American Icon, the story of Alan Mulally, the CEO of Boeing, and then they moved him over to Ford just before the financial crisis. And this is a testament to your getting things done with others principles here. Is all he did, Alan Mulally, moving from Boeing to Ford, is implement his model of working together principles and practices at Ford. And that helped them to innovate, clarify who they were, get things done, be transparent, and that afforded Ford at the time of the financial crisis to be the only auto manufacturer to not need a bailout to survive. And so, I mean, it's like a case study of what you're suggesting, and so
Right.
if we want to build nimble, effective teams, what a great model this is.
Yeah, Marshall Goldsmith's a close friend of mine, and Marshall was coached Alan for a long time. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. He gets that. He gets it from Marshall. That's right.
All right, very cool. So we'll gently close here before I make some closing announcements. Edward, David, any parting words or final thoughts to leave us with today?
no, thanks all of you for paying attention and being interested in hearing what we might have to say, and hopefully it might bring at least a tiny little bit of improvement somewhere in terms of your interactions out there with other people, because we all get things done with others. I don't care how small or how big you are or what you're doing, you still need to engage with other people. So hopefully we've provided a manual, if you get the book, for best practices about all that.
And I would simply add to that hope. So I hope that you take away hope from this, that there are actually simple implementable things that you can do with your team that can dramatically improve the collaboration on your team.
Amazing. So yeah, David, Edward, thanks so much for coming out today. Appreciate your practical wisdom. And again, check out Team, Getting Things Done with Others. Yeah, for more events at the Stoa, you can go to the website, and to training at Dale Carnegie, you can go to the website. This might be the beginning of a Carnegie Stoa type of vibe where we bring in sort of high signal business leaders and thinkers to talk. So many more to come. And yeah, everyone, thanks so much for coming out today.
Thank you, Edward.
Thank you.
David. Real pleasure.